I didn't think I'd see Godzilla vs King Kong in Warzone, but here we are. This is something that's happening. Don't ask me why, I don't really know the full extent of why this is happening, but it exists, it's here, and it looks like a pretty cool event. But most importantly, it's here as part of Season 3's update, which brings about some very, very substantial changes to Warzone, both in terms of the playstyle of the game, the new weaponry in the game, some of the systems in the game, and even new points of interest. There's a lot to dive into here that's really going to shake up how Caldera and Warzone generally plays, so let's dive straight into it. Now, to begin with, of course, we have the major event, which is Godzilla vs King Kong, which is Operation Monarch. Now, I don't really think this is going to be as substantial an event as people think. I'm sure it's going to be cool, but as with most Warzone events, the game's code is pretty rigid, and it's not going to be very interactive, as you've seen with things like Fortnite in the past. I imagine it'll be a couple of cutscenes, a couple of trailers, probably them moving onto the map at some point, then disappearing from it on like a fixed path. But I don't think it's going to be this hugely interactive event, rather something that just looks cool and acts as the backdrop for the changes coming to the map. So let's talk about the map changes, and the first one is Dig Site, which many of you probably won't really know about. It's this really obscure area in between the Ruins segment and the Arsenal segment, and only recently just actually got an update to have actual point of interest text. And the reason for that is that they've added some big skeletal bones and moved the crane away from the cliffside. And this is a really cool move, and I think it's going to make this area of the map much more interesting and enjoyable, and circles do tend to finish here, so I'm glad to see that this area of the map has received a little bit of love, and that transition between moving from mines and arsenal or mines to villages / ruins has been greatly improved by this. Next up is Peak, and sadly this area hasn't been destroyed as people were hoping it has been, and I think it's a little unfortunate. I think people generally wanted Peak to be taken away, not because it was a stale point of interest, but rather because when you move from Peak to somewhere else, or from somewhere else to Peak, you have this really bad terrain, this really open terrain, and the transition to and from that area isn't good. Now, I think the COD team has kind of missed the memo here a little bit, because they've changed the point of interest, but they haven't really changed the transition by the looks of things, which I think is what people were primarily looking for. Nonetheless, Peak now has fortifications and multiple levels now within the Peak area. It's a fully fortified bunker system that kind of looks a little resemblant of a Black Ops 2 map in a weird way, and looks pretty decent. Lots of fortifications, a fresh coat of paint, and allegedly new interior and exterior ascenders to allow you to move around the point of interest much more easily, which is cool to see. Definitely having that mobility in there will help the general POI. Now, the big change that I'm happy about is Runway rebuilt, and this is really cool to see because Runway always felt a little bit barren and a little bit average, and there have been finishes there in games that I've seen before, and it just never really lived up to expectation. Runway has always been a fairly plain and docile area, very open, very boring, and never really offered any interesting gameplay dynamics. But it's good to see that that's been changed here, with lots of new containers and lots of assets that you've seen from around the map before, but laid out with lots of density. There's lots of buildings to utilize here and lots of various forms of cover, and this will hopefully spice up the map a little bit more and make Runway, which has previously been a bit boring, much more interesting. Interestingly, in the blog post it says, as darker days appear on the horizon, Caldera's Runway will be rebuilt with a set of barracks, hangars, and other structural additions, replacing the jungle overgrowth and abandoned lodgings in the area. Now, that seems to be a very strong statement in my opinion, that they're looking to remove as much jungle as possible and make the map a little bit more clean. This probably gives us a bit of a look into the design philosophy as Caldera evolves. The lagoon area is also getting a facelift with the sandbar. Now, it says that this area is a new addition to the area that adds a new route with moored ships, and this weird sort of rock-looking totem in the middle as well. And it also says the vehicles can traverse over this area. Now, there seems to be a lot of a coordinated effort here to take boring areas of the map or areas of the map that don't have a lot of cover and add lots of cover to them. Lagoon definitely was lacking in cover and now has much more. The similar system has applied with Runway as well. Speaking of changes, there's a new gulag called Hold. And this was developed by the Toys for Bob team, which is a 3-lane symmetrical arena, which is in the belly of a ship off the coast of Caldera, which looks really cool to see, and that it has identical hallways on the perimeter of an otherwise open space, meaning that this is going to be a fully symmetrical design, a bit like some of the 2v2 gunfight maps you've seen in the past in Modern Warfare. There's also some quality of life changes coming to the game, which is super exciting to hear about, and allegedly we're going to see patch notes on that soon. There'll be a mid-season update called Underground Rumblings, which alludes to something happening below the surface of Caldera, which many of you will probably notice from the tunnel systems already existing in the game. Moving on, let's have a look at the weapons. We've got the M1916, which many of you will know from Battlefield 1, which is a semi-automatic rifle, and it's a combination of power and fire rate. So I'm a little bit worried about this weapon, if I'm being honest. It was very effective in Battlefield 1 because it's a heavy hitting weapon, but also a relatively quick firing weapon, and PTSD flashbacks to what happened with the DMR are very much in the front of my mind here. At launch as well, we also have the Nikita AVT assault rifle, which is allegedly an accurate and reliable with best-in-class fire rate and can be outfitted for either CQC or long range. So it'll be interesting to see how this performs. Seems like a very XM4 style weapon, and I think it'll be quite interesting. We also have a sledgehammer coming for melee in the mid-season, as well as the H4 Blixen SMG. And it says that very little is known about the blowback of this SMG, except that it uses a 9x19mm cartridge and shares similar design techniques to the Sten and PPSH. Now, this is allegedly part of the classified arms situation, so we'll see more about that in the mid-season update. There are some new operators coming as well, but I don't think many people are all that interested in the new operators. But what I will say is that there are some cool cosmetics on the way, including a Godzilla cosmetic, a King Kong cosmetic, and by the looks of things, a Mecha Godzilla cosmetic partway through it as well. And if you're on console, this is going to be a fairly substantial update, because they're separating out how the game works and interacts with other games, especially separating Warzone from Call of Duty Modern Warfare by the looks of things. So it seems as though you'll be able to download Warzone and Modern Warfare separately now, including the individual packs for Modern Warfare, including the DLC, multiplayer, and special ops. Really cool if you're looking to reduce the footprint on your console and you only play Warzone, and something to bear in mind. Caldera Iron Trials is also something that is allegedly happening, and the skybox is changing from a bright sunny day to a storm by the looks of things. It looks pretty cool, and so far I'm saying Season 3 looks very solid. Now, when we hear more of the quality of life changes coming to the game and how things are going to shift up, I will definitely bring you guys another video on that, as it seems to be that there is a very active effort to improve how Warzone feels generally and quality of life improvements in the game. We also know as well that the sniper rifle changes are happening in Season 3, and it's alleged that the Swiss K31 and Kar 98 are finally being nerfed and that a separation is going to occur in the sniper rifle classes. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful. If you did, leave a thumbs up, leave a like, we're on the road to 100k, and I'll catch you again in the next one.